Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the lunch and good on you for sticking around, coming into session 2 here today. So what we're going to cover in this session, we're going to cover some more, graphic design aspects of CSS. So we're going to look at positioning of elements. We're going to be looking at element transformations, transitions, image filters, and then some animations. Okay, and just as an example of some of the things you'll be able to do after this session, so our 2 exercises given to you in this session, the first one is this Christmas tree here. So you're basically given a bunch of images and you'll be able to position them on a page like this, and you'll be able to start an animation when you hover over that makes the Christmas tree baubles drop off the tree. And also if you hover over one of these, you can see that expand. Exercise 2 is this one, which is a bit of a Pokemon related example here, and you can mouse over to see, some fancy stuff happening there. So that kind of stuff is what you'll be able to do after this session. Alrighty. So let's take this one step at a time. So the first thing I'll show you is image filters. Okay, so I have this nice image of a cat here on my page, and I want to apply filters to this. So when I say an image filter, I'm talking about things that you might be able to do in Photoshop or a similar image editing software. Now, I could do that offline and then just upload the modified version of my image to my website, but I can actually get CSS to apply some image filters for me. As an example of that, so if I just modify this selector here, so if you remember from our first session, this hashtag selector, that's an ID selector, it's selecting that image, which is down here, ID equals meow. If I give that a filter, and that filter can be grayscale, for example, and I do that, and now we look at the image there, we can see that the image is in fact as grayscale. So if you look at the reference slides, you'll see a whole bunch of these different image filters that you can apply, and you can combine them and such too. Another common one that people might want to use if they're going for that old-timey photo look is the sepia filter. So that looks something like this here. And there's other than those kind of filters, there's things like blurs and lots of different filters you would be able to apply in an image editing software. You can get the CSS to do it for you. Okay. So the next thing we're going to look at, we're going to start looking at different ways of moving and reshaping elements on the page. So the first one I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you some examples of CSS transformations. Okay, so I've got 4 cat images here. All right, and I'm going to modify each one in a different way using CSS transforms. Okay, so transforms let you translate elements on a page. So translation is move them from where they are by default. Rotate is rotating them. Scale is changing the size. Okay. Now you'll notice when I do this, when you're using transforms, according to the page layout, the image will always be in this position that it's in. So if you translate this image, you might be able to put it over some of the other text or something like that. So as an example of what a translate does, so all the transforms use the transform CSS property here, and then you use one of these CSS functions. So translate maybe 50 pixels, comma, negative 100 pixels. And let's see what that looks like. So coming back down here, oh, where are we? Oh, did I not type that correctly? I might have done this wrong, hang on. And there we go, this one's fine. So I moved it 50 pixels to the right. So these translates when you, the first one is the left and right movement, and the second one is the up and down movement. And so this is moving it 50 pixels towards the right and 100 pixels down from where it was. And it should be that if I do negative values, it goes the other way. Yes, it's working now. I don't know why it wasn't before. So now I moved it 50 pixels the other way. And I'll just move it, if I put negative here, yep, so it's pushed itself up over the top there. So that's one way of applying a translation to an image. You'll notice that the page is laying itself out as if the image was in its original location. Rotating, again, is another one of these. Rotate, and I can give it, 45 DEG for degrees. Stick that one back in there, and we can see the image has rotated there. Scaling, you go if you give it one argument like that, scale 1.5 will make it 1.5 times larger than it would have been normally, so you can see that one's a lot bigger. If I go, I give it two arguments. The first one is going to be the left and right, and the second one is going to be up and down. So now it's 1.5 times bigger from left to right, but it's only 80%, like 0.8 as big up and down. So it looks squished like that. And then combination of all these can be done. You just combine them all on one line. So I can go rotate by 45 or by, say, 50 degrees, and then, I'll do a scale by 1.4 times. So I can combine them like this, and now this one is rotated and scaled. Okay. Now, these transforms, they work with CSS pseudo classes just like any other CSS property. So if I go and add myself a new rule here, for example, and I'll just grab that and put it there. So now the image is going to look normal until I mouse over it, and then it changes. So you can use this to get these transforms to get more pronounced, like visual effects and popping of your elements on the page. All right. So now, what if I don't want the image? So when I mouse over this, it immediately changes to that new shape, right? What if I don't want that? What if I want a nice transition between this stage and this stage? Yeah, so I want the image to actually, visually rotate when the user mouses over it and expand in size. So I can do that using the transition element, okay? So the transition element here, the transition property takes three different arguments, three different things you need to provide this. The first one is what property are we trying to transition here? So I'm trying to transition the transform property. So I'll stick that first. The second one is how long should this take? I'll say 1 second, so 1s. And the third one is the timing function. So timing function describes how the movement occurs. And I'll show you the difference between the two most commonly used ones. So I'll stick ease in there for now, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if we go back down here, and now I mouse over this, so we can see this effect, okay? Now, notice that when I make that transition happen, it starts slower and then speeds up in the middle and then slows down at the end. So it's more organic, you could say. The other one that people use quite often is linear. So linear is more mechanical. The animation will play at the same speed throughout. So you see if you can notice the difference from what it was before till now. So you can see the difference. It's a different effect depending on the timing function that you can use. Ease and linear aren't the only two that exist, so you can go and have a look online and play around with lots of different timing functions to see what you can get. Okay, so I can apply transitions to more properties than just one. So here I'm applying the transition to the transform property. But let's go up and let's do something with this image here. So if I make we'll make a hovered version of this, and we'll say so we'll say when you hover over the image, make it sepia back to 0%, so no filter. And we'll change the background color of the image as well to something orange. There we go. So the background color of an image, you won't see it in the image itself unless the image has some transparency, but you will see it in the padding that's around the image. So again, this is what we have now. So I mouse over that image and it changes back to its default coloring, and we get that orange background color showing through. And if I want to transition both of these, if I want to transition everything at the same speed, I can go transition, I can write all to mean transition all the properties over, say, 0.5 seconds, and I'll use that timing function there. Okay, come here, and you can see that both the background color and the image filter get transitioned appropriately. If I want to specify that, the filter should transition really fast, but the background color can transition a bit slower, I can do that as well. I can say, okay, transition the filter property over 0.5 seconds, and with the easing function, comma, transition the background color over 2 seconds with the linear function. So I can do them as a comma separated list like this if I want to apply different kinds of transitions to different properties. So now we can see that. We can see that the color of the image changes really fast, but the background takes quite a while to switch between transparent and orange. Okay, so do we have any questions at this point about transitions and image filters and transforms? Cool. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to look at positioning elements. Okay, so we want to be able to move elements around on the page. Now we've seen one way of doing this translate function. That's appropriate in some cases, but sometimes you need to be able to do more. You need more control, or it's a different use case. For example, these Christmas tree, I positioned all these images. I didn't use that translate function. I used what I'm about to show you instead. So, firstly, a little bit of background, okay, with CSS positioning. So I'm just going to go to some slides here. So the default way of laying out a web page, it's called the normal flow, okay? And if you don't specify any changes to this, your website's going to be laid out such that all the block level elements will appear on a new line, all the inline elements will appear taking up exactly the amount of space that they need to take up. Okay, so this is an example of that normal flow there. Now we can override the normal flow for certain elements by specifying their position property. Okay, so there are 5 values that we'll experiment with. So the first one is static, and that's the default. So if you don't specify anything, it's static. Second one is relative, so let's look at that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this gray box here. Okay, I'm going to change this gray box to be relative. So that one's here, and I'm going to go position relative. Okay, so right now that didn't do anything by itself. So when we use these positions, we want to specify some coordinates of where these things are going to go. And I can do that using the top and left properties. So if I put top 0, left 0, this is the default as well, so this isn't going to change anything. Now if I change top to some positive value, it's going to move the image down. So if I go 50 pixels, we can see now that that gray box moved down by 50 pixels. Everything inside the gray box, so the red and the white one there, they stayed within their container. All right. Similarly, left, a positive value will move things towards the right. And then you can give negative values to either of these. So negative 10 pixel top will move it slightly up. Negative 30 pixel left will move it slightly off the left-hand side of the page there. Okay, so the key is relative here. So position relative will position the element relative to where it would have been had you not used this setting. So, and as you can see, the rest of the page, again, didn't change at all. So I was able to move my gray box here so it was hanging over this text down here. So this text didn't move to make way for it. All right, let's look at another one. Let's look at absolute instead. Now let's look what happens to the rest of the page. So now changing position of that gray box to absolute has gone and pulled it out of the normal flow entirely. So as far as the rest of the page is concerned, that gray box doesn't exist. It's not counted in the page layout anymore. So it's kind of appearing on top of the rest of the document. Now, by default, when you do that, it will display itself wherever it would have been normally. It's just the rest of the page is ignoring it. So you can see I comment this line out, the rest of the page goes back here, I add that line back in, and that gray box stayed where it was, the rest of the page just shifted as though it wasn't there. Now, this time when I specify a top and left value, I'm specifying a top and left relative to, let's experiment. So if I go top 0, left 0, okay, we can see that the gray box is now actually in the top left corner of my screen there. All right. And so if, for example, if I went 50 pixels now, it'll be 50 pixels over, 50 pixels down from the top of the screen, for example. Okay. Now, position absolute does not always, it does not always position the component according to the top left of the screen. All right, so let me show you another demo. I'm going to temporarily get rid of the positioning in that gray box. I'm going to apply some positioning to this red box instead. Okay, I'm going to give the red box absolute positioning. Okay, and I'm going to make it top 0, left 0. Now we can see this is the same behavior we saw before. Okay, so that red box is being completely removed from the rest of the page layout and is now stuck at position 0, 0 on the top left of the page. Okay, but now watch what happens when I modify this gray box again to have its own position. So if I give my gray box relative positioning or absolute positioning, okay, the red box that's inside the gray box that has absolute positioning is no longer positioning itself according to the top left of the whole page, but it's now positioning itself according to the top left of that gray box that is inside. And I'll move it to 50 pixels, so we can see that distance there. All right. So basically what it does is you have a component with absolute positioning. What it'll do is it'll look up the hierarchy of components in the page layout until it finds one that has absolute or relative positioning, and it will lay itself out according to wherever that component is. Or if it doesn't find any, then it'll lay itself out according to the top left of the whole page. So that's why with absolute positioning, my red box there, that's why if I don't give my gray box any positioning whatsoever, the red box is ignoring the rest of the page and laying itself out according to 50 by 50 away from the top left of the page. But once I give my gray box relative or absolute positioning, now the red box is laying itself out according to where the gray box is. So similarly, this white box in here, if I give that white box absolute positioning and say top and left of 10 pixels and 5 pixels, that will be 10 and 5 away from the top left of the red box, because the white box is inside the red box and the red box has a positioning. But then if I took away the red box's positioning, now the white box will lay itself out according to the gray box, because the white box is still inside the gray box and the gray box has positioning. And if I took the gray box's positioning away, now the white box lays itself out according to the top left of the whole page. So that's what absolute and relative positioning are about. There we go. I'll just do that there. Okay. Now, there are a couple more CSS positionings that we can look at. So the next one is fixed. So let's see what happens if I give my gray box here, if I give it fixed positioning, and I actually spell it correctly. Okay, so again, the page has kind of ignored the fact that this gray box is existing now. All that gray box is children, so the red box is still laying itself out according to where the gray box is. If I move the rest of my page though, you'll notice that the gray box is just staying there. So that's what that's what fixed positioning does. It will stick it wherever you say. So if I give it a top, and left, so it works like absolute. It works like absolute positioning in terms of removing itself from the page layout and in terms of where it finds its initial position, but it will never ever move from the position you give it, even when the user is scrolling through your web page. So that's what fixed positioning does. Okay. And then the last one is sticky positioning. Okay. Now, sometimes this demo doesn't work so well in CodePen, but we'll see if we can get it to work here. So I've given it sticky positioning, and my page is back to looking normal. But when I scroll up, yes, it's working. So it will get it as you scroll up. Once you reach the position that you specify here in this top, it will stay there. So that's what it means. It sticks to that position. So it's scrolling like normal at the moment, but as soon as that top 0, it stay there and it won't move any further. So that's what sticky positioning is. And so you can do that. Using that, you can have a nav bar up the top of your document or a sidebar, and like the nav bar will just stay there. Well, a nav bar staying up the top can probably be done using fixed positioning. And a sidebar, like if the sidebar starts halfway down the page and then as you scroll it hits the top and it won't move any further. Or you can use that to have all your annoying advertisements on the side and make sure that they're always visible to the user at all times. Right, make sure that they never leave the screen. So that's what that kind of CSS positioning is about. So the ones that you'll use in this exercise here are going to be the absolute and relative positioning. My recommendation would be that the main image, the main overall image, that everything else is inside, you'd give that a relative positioning, and then all the other images inside that you would give them absolute positioning and stick them at various locations throughout here. Note, by the way, that when you do this exercise, you don't have to put the bubbles or the tree in exactly the same place as in the screenshot. I'm not going to make you get the exact pixel values correct. So, you can put the bubbles wherever you want. All right. So the last thing that I'll talk about now is going to be the animation. So how did I get this effect when I moused over? All right. So I'm going to demonstrate an animation. Okay, firstly, I'm going to get rid of that sticky positioning. That's step 1. So what I'm going to do is I've got this cat down the bottom here inside this little div with a border, and I'm going to get an animation going that will just make this cat bounce from left to right across the screen. Okay? So let's look at how we can do that. So the first step with an animation is to specify what's called the keyframes. Okay, so we've got this slightly new CSS syntax that we're looking at here that has this @ sign in front of the word. So @keyframes is how you specify how an animation should look. Okay, and this name I've given it, that can be any name you like. So I've called this one Bouncy Cat, and this will let us refer to that animation somewhere else within our CSS. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to say, okay, what I can specify is I can specify inside here some I can specify a from and a to, and then inside here I can specify where does this animation start? Like what should the styles and positions look like when the animation starts? And then the to block lets me specify what should the styles and positions look like when the animation finishes, and then I can use some other properties somewhere else to actually make that animation play in different ways. So let's look into that. Okay, where do I want this thing to finish up? I want it to finish all the way on the right-hand side. So I'm just going to put this for now, and we'll see what happens. I mean, sorry, not. I'll give it a margin left of 100% to finish, which means it'll sort of push itself all the way across the right-hand side of the screen. The from position, if you want it to start where it is on the page, which I do, like I want it to start where it is now, then I don't need to specify anything in the from space here. And now that I've got this bouncy cat animation defined, then I need to apply it to something. Okay, so my image here has an ID of animated image, which is this one here. So, there are a few different things that I want to be able to specify here. I want to be able to specify what's the name of the animation, and the name is going to be the thing that we called it, that bouncy cat there. Okay, then there's animation duration, which is how long should it take. So I'll make it take, 5 seconds, okay, to get across to the other side. If we look here, the animation is playing, and then it stops. Now, we also saw it go a little bit off the side of the screen, which isn't quite what we want. So let's see what's going on here. That's this value. A margin left of 100% will push it all the way across to the right. What we want to do is say, okay, all the way across to the right minus however big the image happens to be. And if we look at the image is 150 pixels wide, and it has 20 pixels of padding on either side. So I can say, so that would be like 190 pixels, 150 plus 2 times 20, 190. So I can do this. I can go and that will say go almost all the way over, but not quite, and then it sort of stops there. Now, if we want to make it stop, so you see how on the left-hand side of the image there's this little amount of margin space, which is 5 pixels. So let's add the 5-pixel margin as well. So it stops a little bit before, and there we go. Okay. So when you apply an animation to a component, like I'm doing here, that animation by default will play through one time, okay? I want it to play more than once. So if I go at animation iteration count 2, so the animation, it will play through once, and then it'll play through again, and then it will stop. So notice every time the animation starts playing, it goes back to whatever the starting position was. Okay. Now, if I want the animation to never stop, I can write under the animation iteration count as being infinite. Okay. So now my animation will just keep doing this forever. okay? But I want it instead, I want it to bounce back and forth, okay? So what I can do there is, what is the property for this? I know it's like alternate. Sorry, I just forgot the name. I'm just going to look at my own notes here. Yeah, that's the one. Animation direction was what I was after. So the default's forwards. You can also go backwards, which will make the animation play backwards. Or the one I'm after today is alternate, which will make it play forward, then reverse, then forward, and so on. And so I now have this cat, which is just going to move backwards and forwards across the screen. This is perhaps a good demonstration also of the different timing functions. So with the transitions, we had that timing function where I showed you linear versus ease. You can do the same thing with animations as well. So the default is ease, and we can see that it speeds up in the middle, slows down at the start and end. I can go animation timing function linear, and we'll get a different behavior for the animation playing. So we'll see now it just plays at the same speed all throughout that animation. Okay. Okay. So I've got a couple of questions. Okay. So my first question is, now you see this animation is just playing, right? It's just playing, it's not going to stop no matter what I do. But if we look at the Christmas tree, like these baubles are not falling off the tree until I mouse over this image here. So my question to you would be, how do you think I did that? How did I make it so this animation only starts playing when I mouse over the tree? Sorry? Yep. So I've used the pseudo class. Now I'm animating the baubles, okay, but I'm mousing over. I'm not mousing over the baubles. I'm mousing over the image itself, or the background container. So what I've got to do is I've got to use a combination to get this functionality, a combination of another kind of CSS selector along with the pseudo class. So let me show you what I mean here. Oops, bring this back up. Okay. So if I go, for example, so this div down the bottom is called animation div, which is this one here. Now if I went animation div and then I went animated image like this. What this will do is it will style any animated image inside the animation div. If I write a CSS selector like this, so style the animated image that's inside the animation div, and we can see that will still work by taking all that animation code from there and putting it here. So this animated image div is inside this animation div, and so it will have these styles applied to it. And we can see the same behavior as we were getting before. So can someone tell me what I need to change about this CSS selector to get it to only work when I'm hovering over the animation div? where do I need to add the pseudo class? Any ideas at all? Sorry, what was that? So if I put it here, this will apply, this CSS select that I've written here means any animated image that I'm hovering over that happens to be inside this div. So the behavior there is that it's not animated, and it's still not animated. If I hover over the image itself, then it starts animating, but as soon as my mouse leaves the image, it stops animating, which is not exactly what I want. So I want to put the hover pseudo class next to the animation div. So this is saying style anything with this ID that's inside something with this ID that I'm hovering over, which is exactly what I want. So I scroll down to the bottom, and as soon as my mouse goes inside this little border down the bottom here, it starts playing the animation. And as soon as I take it away, it stops playing. So that's a good trick to make an animation start playing when you mouse over the parent element. Okay. Now, last point I'd like to make with animations, they can be a lot more complicated than this. Here I'm just changing literally one property. If I wanted to, I could, change the background color to blue as the animation progressed. So we can see we can specify as many properties as we need to in these, and it will animate all of them, as we can see here. So it's alternating between blue and beige. And the last point is I can specify, so instead of from and to, I can also write these as 0% and 100%. Okay, that means the same thing. So right now it's doing the same thing, but I can add as many other different percentages as I want in here. So for example, I could add a 50%, and by 50%, the background color should be red. So now the background color will change to red by the time it's halfway through, and then go from red to blue from the halfway mark forward, and then it'll go back to red, and then back to the default color. So, and again, any percentage value, you can have as many of these as you like. So, for example, here's a slightly more complicated one on these slides, okay? And as for what this does, I'm just going to give you 2 minutes to talk about this with your neighbor about what this might do, what this might look like on screen, and then I'm interested to hear someone explain what this is going to look like on screen. I'll give one of those coffee cups if anyone comes up with a good explanation of what's going on here. But just discuss with the person next to you, what this might end up looking like. Okay, does anyone want to have a go at explaining what this might look like on screen? Yeah. Yeah. Yep, that's right. Would you be able to tell me, like, how it changes size? Like, use some like hand gestures or something to signal like what it does. Yeah, I saw up there what I was after. So it basically, say this is how it starts off. It kind of expands and then goes like this. Because what happens is that, so it starts at like 50 pixels wide and expands to 150 pixels wide between 0 and 25%. And then it goes back to 50 pixels wide, but the margin left changes to 100 pixels. So essentially, if you do the math, that means the right-hand side of the shape is staying where it is, and the left-hand side is going to get squished. And then it does it again between the and 75%, and then again all the way to the end. And so what we end up with is something that looks like that. And I've called it snaky animation for a reason here. So if I just open this one up, then we can see that animation playing along the bottom here. So if what you see here is close to what you were thinking, good job. Yeah, so I'll have a coffee cup your way for being the first to answer, and your way for getting this right. Yeah, so good job, both of you. All right, so that's all I have to say for this session. Again, as with all things web development, best way of getting this stuff down is to practice. So, yep, these are made available. This one, whoops, not that one. This one should already be up there, and now that I've clicked save, all the changes I just made during the session should be available. So if you go find this link, you should be able to see all this code. This one, I'll get one of the tutors to post this one as well. I don't think it's up there just yet. Okay. But yeah, have fun animating a Christmas tree and a Pikachu. Yeah. All right. Again, there'll be another cup up for grabs for the first one to finish this.